to myself again. But it's the only...
Hi and welcome along to this NUFC Matters special with me, Steve Wraith, and I'm joined by John Gibson and Malcolm MacDonald today to look back on the wonderful cup run to Wembley in 1976 and obviously talk a little bit about that, the games, the build-up, the final, and I'm going to hand over, as I always do on these shows, to John. Leave it to your capable hands, John, because it's your era, your time, and there's no better man to talk us through it.
Yeah, a very interesting time. It was our second appearance, of course, at Wembley in 2 years, following the FA Cup in 1974. And, of course, it still remains the 76 as Newcastle's only ever appearance in a League Cup final, which is of some significance. And what people will probably not realise, there's been a dramatic change at Newcastle United because we've gone from 1974, Joe Harvey, the last great gesture of the Joe Harvey teams, through to Gordon Lee, the new manager. And the interesting thing was this was very much a cup season for Newcastle United, as Malcolm will well remember, because apart from getting to Wembley in the League Cup final, we got to the sixth round, the quarterfinals of the FA Cup at the same time. So it was quite a stupendous season in terms of knockout domestic competitions. And it all began way back in the second round of the Cup, before I bring Malcolm in, when we played Southport. And the interesting thing, which a lot of people won't remember, is that Newcastle were actually originally drawn away at Southport in the Cup, but it was switched to St James's Park on the request of Southport themselves, which was allowed in those days because they wanted, for financial reasons, they wanted a better gate to make a few quid. I think they knew that the derriere was going to be spanked, so they just wanted a few quid before they went out. And there was 23,352 there, so they did get a few quid. They also got the derriere spanked because it was 6-0 that Newcastle won. Malcolm was injured, which you might well remember. We had played Villa just before we played Southport, and Malcolm got injured and missed 3 league matches plus the League Cup tie against Southport. But because it's Southport, it didn't matter quite as much. Paul Cannell come in, Malcolm, to deputise for you, and we strolled. It was Paul Cannell's only appearance in the League Cup throughout the whole of that season, although he was sub at Wembley. He scored 2 and Gowling scored 4. And we coasted Southport 6-0. I don't know if any memories, Malcolm, because as I say, that was the game when you were injured. You'd got done against Villa.
That's right. Yeah, I'd had a cracking start to that particular season, John. In the first 6 games, I scored 8 goals. And
no change there, then.
Well, and because I was prolifically scoring, I believe it or not, I got into Gordon Lee's bad books.
I know you did get in his bad books.
Yeah, and it was 2 of us. What? Well, let me tell you about me first. Before the season started, Gordon Lee came into the dressing room, and he said. He said, I've signed Alan Gowling, and he went on to say he's a terrific goal scorer, got a great history with Man U, and then he turned to me and he said, and he's going to score more goals than you, pointing at me. So I looked at him and I said, how about you put a week of your wages against a week of mine, and we'll see who finishes the top goal scorer. I said, and that means that I'm giving you 2-1 because I know how much you're on.
I was about to suggest that, Malcolm. Yes.
Yeah. So he sort of blustered and moved on. And anyway, so Alan Gowling came in, and John Tudor had left. Well, no, John was still there, but he was
injured, I think, Malcolm, wasn't he?
Yeah, he wasn't the preferred choice, and it was Alan Gowling and myself up front for the first few games. And in the opening 6 games, I scored 8 goals. Alan Gowling only scored 1, and that was an own goal. And so Gordon Lee was he was getting a bit irate about the situation. And as you rightly say, I got injured against Aston Villa, and when I returned, Gordon Lee switched me to a midfield role. And he played Alan Gowling up front, and he sort of pushed Mickey Burns up a bit as the main support, and dropped me back. And it took me a few games to get myself organised in that change of a role. I'd only ever played up front at Newcastle, and you know, the whole thing just stank. That Gordon Lee, it was almost as if he was trying to make out that there were 2 factions in the dressing room, and that he was happy for that to be so. That with Alan Gowling having come in, and Jeff Nolte, and there were 3 or 4 others that he had brought in, and he was sort of trying to almost create a split in the dressing room, that I think everybody was too professional to go along with that, and it was all more in Gordon Lee's head than anything else. But Gordon Lee, he turned his dissatisfaction away from me one particular game. It was the 4th game of the season, as I recall, and we played Derby County away from home. And in the 5th minute, the referee decided that Mickey Burns had nastily fouled one of the Derby players. Now, you were fortunate to find Mickey Burns getting into a challenge, and I don't think I ever saw him win a tackle, for heaven's sake, nor did I ever see him foul anybody. And bless him, he was sent off. That was in about the 5th minute. And so down to 10 men with a midfield player light, Terry Hibbett, he sort of shuffled inside a little, and he played a left centre role and an outside role on the left. And he was absolutely brilliant. He worked his socks off, and the way the game went was that Derby scored, and we equalised, and then Derby scored 2 goals. I retrieved one of them, scoring in about the 70th minute, and we were into the last 20 minutes and desperately searching for an equaliser. And Terry was just absolutely brilliant, doing the work of 2 men, trying to get the ball forward and create chances. And we were giving Derby one hell of a crack. And of course, they were one of the top sides at the time. They had won the league just a couple of years beforehand. And anyway, the final whistle went, and Terry Hibbett literally sunk to the ground in utter exhaustion. And excuse me. And so I went over and I helped Hibby up, and I got my arm around his back and was holding him under the armpit. And I said, "Come on, Hibby, let's get you into the dressing room." I said, "I have to tell you, that is the best I've ever seen you play. Absolutely brilliant you were." And so he's staggering literally to walk across the pitch. I finally got him into the dressing room, and he's just sat there, shattered, exhausted, and he and we've had a little chat, because we always sat pretty close to each other in the dressing rooms when we were changing, and then he finally took his kit off, and we got into the very deep plunge bath that there was there at the baseball ground, and by the time Terry and I got in, most of the players had finished in the bath, and they were going up the ladder and out and to get dressed. And so Hibby and I, we sat there in this plunge bath, and we just chatted away and what have you, and then having got ourselves washed and what have you, I had to literally push him up the stairs of this plunge bath. He hadn't got the strength to walk it, and so we got into the dressing room, and he's got a towel round him. He, as tired as he was, he never missed a trick of anything that went on, and all of our kit would be packed into like a huge hamper, and the boots would go into another hamper, and one hamper was on top of the other. They cleared all the kit and the boots away, and on top of the top hamper was a brown paper parcel about sort of so big, and so Hibby, he pointed at the package on the top of the hamper, and realizing it was a pair of boots inside, he said to the two physios and Richard Dinnis, the coach. Gordon Lee was outside at the time, and he said, "So who's not going home then?" And just as he said this, Gordon Lee came in through the door, and the two physios went red and sort of turned their backs, and Richard Dinnis went red. Gordon Lee walked across the dressing room, picked the parcel up, shoved them under Terry's arm, and says, "You're not going home." Freddie Goodwin, the manager of Birmingham's, outside. I've just done a deal with him. He said, "So go and talk to him." And he said, "And make sure you get yourself sorted out," he said, "because I don't want you at Newcastle." And I sat there, absolutely shocked and stunned. He had just had his best ever game for Newcastle, and he was literally being told to do one, get out, go. And so I sat Terry down, who was literally quite angry, and I said to him, I said, "Now you calm down." I said, "You don't go making any decisions out of anger." I said, "You go and see what Freddie Goodwin's got to say, but then let's get home and you can have a chat with your missus and decide from there." I said, "Remember, there's lots to be done if you are going to go, schooling for the kids and so on and so forth, the purchase of a house and all of that." I said, "Just take your time and make sure it's the right thing to do." Yeah, thanks very much. So he went to speak with Gordon, with with the Birmingham manager, and I went into the players' lounge and hadn't been there 5 minutes. And when Gordon Lee came in and said, "Right, all the Newcastle players, come on out. Let's get on the bus. Time to go home." And we went, "Whoa, what's the rush all about?" And so we sort of very slowly manoeuvred ourselves out of the players' lounge through the corridors of the ground, and then out the main door, across the road, and onto the bus. And we were on there, and Gordon Lee, he got on the bus and he said, "Right, driver," he said, "away we go." And we went, whoa, hold on. Terry Hibbett's still there talking to Freddie Goodwin. And Gordon Lee said, "He's not coming back with us. He's going to be a Birmingham player. So driver, drive on." And bless him, Bob, the driver, he was a lovely, lovely fella, and he realised that there was something going on, and he sort of took his time over it all. And then just as he was sort of about to pull away, Terry has come out of the door, the main door, and so we've gone, "Bob, hold up, hold it. There's the wee man." And Gordon Lee stood up and said, "Driver, if you value your job, drive on. We're leaving the little blank here in Derby." And poor old Terry, he was left there, and he had to get the night train across to Sheffield. From I think it was Derby to Chesterfield, got another train to Sheffield, and then he had to wait until the very first train from Sheffield to York, and then another train up. And I just sat in the bus thinking, I cannot tolerate this at all. It is so wrong. And Gordon Lee seemed quite happy to do this. And from there, he went very icy towards myself and towards Paddy Howard and 2 or 3 others that weren't his signings as such. And from there, the whole mood had changed. And when I came back from that injury that you mentioned, John, that I got against Aston Villa, the first team that I was selected in, I was put in midfield.
Yeah,
and all I could remember was Gordon Lee, before the season started, said, "And this player will score more goals than you, MacDonald." You know.
The whole situation within 2 years less of Joe's team to the team we're talking about that went on to play in the League Cup final. I'll read, just for viewers and listeners, I'll read out the Newcastle team that played against Southport. And remember, Malcolm was injured, so he wasn't in it. It was Mahoney, Natris, Kennedy, Nolte, Keeley, Howard, Cassidy, Burns, Cannell, Gowling, and Tommy Craig. Barrow was the sub. Now, if you remember the teams from 74, in such a short space of time, there was no McFall, there was no Frank Clark, Craigie was injured, of course, there was no Bob Moncur, there was no Hibby, there was no Drinky, there was no John Tudor. There was a huge turnover in personnel. But as I say, and we're going on with this one, the interesting thing is, despite all that, and despite the fact that I felt travelling very closely with Newcastle at the time. What Malcolm would confirm, that there become two camps within the dressing room of the Gordon League camp and the old camp from Joe's days. We did get to the League Cup final, and we did get to the 6th round of the FA Cup, which was quite staggering. Having had Southport and what was really a bye, especially when it was at our place, 6-0 in the second round, we got Bristol Rovers in the next round. Away was 1-1, and we were 1-0 down until near the end, and Gowling got an equaliser.
That's right.
David Craig was back, Barrow was back, and Supermac was back for that team. And the replay at home, we won 2-0 with goals from Irving Natras and a Tommy Craig penalty. Any particular recollections of Bristol Rovers over the two games, Malcolm?
Yeah, we found it really difficult against them. I hated their ground. It was a greyhound track between the pitch and the supporters, and there was, the atmosphere wasn't good at all. But I'd had a bad time there when playing for Luton, and and I didn't really enjoy it playing for Newcastle down there at all. I think things were a little bit different when we were able to get an equaliser down there. And Alan Gowling, he scored, I think, with about 15 minutes to go. To get the replay, and we didn't make a mistake on that. But they were difficult, and it's a strange old thing. But we always used to find difficulty against lower league sides. It was never easy for us.
In 1974, when in the FA Cup run, Malcolm, we did, didn't we? Hendon and Scunthorpe. Right. Yeah.
Hendon, the
Scunthorpe
took the draw. Yeah.
Yeah. And Scunthorpe did up here, I think.
Scunthorpe as well. Yeah. We had difficulties with that completely different style of football. But of course, once we got back to sides of the higher level, then we started to dominate.
Yeah, I mean, the next round, the 4th round, Malcolm, having got rid of Bristol Rovers at the second attempt, we went to QPR and won relatively comfortably 3-1, where goals by Jeff Null, Ricky Burns and yourself, Malcolm, and that was a comprehensive win, really, I think.
Yes, it was. It was very comprehensive, and then we met a lower league side again, and
that's right.
And all the problems restarted in that 5th round.
That was interesting. That was interesting, Malcolm, because it was the Mags playing the Mags, because it was Newcastle United, Steve, against Notts County, so it was the Magpies against the Magpies. And we only scraped, now this is interesting, and I want to ask Malcolm about it. We only scraped through 1-0, but the interesting thing was the goal, because it was a long throw-in by a bloke called Malcolm MacDonald, which went virtually through to the keeper, Eric McManus, who managed to fumble it into his own net for an own goal. Now, the questions I've got to ask is how Malcolm MacDonald would ever allow the goalkeeper to claim an own goal when it come off him to start with. And the second thing I would like to know is what the hell is our number 9 legend doing, taking long throws? But explain yourself.
Well, I whenever we felt that a long throw was useful, it was I had the longest throw in the club. And
you're supposed to be on the end of it, though, Malcolm. You were supposed to be on the end of the long throw.
Paddy Howard went up and filled in for me. But I actually, and during that season, I actually won the long throw competition that the BBC had. And I beat Martin Peters in the final, which was held at Ivory. Yeah. Sorry, John.
Martin
Yeah.
Peters it was, did you say? Yeah.
No, Martin Chivers.
Martin Chivers, the centre forward at Spurs, yeah.
Yeah.
Centre forwards business, yes.
That's right. They seem to be the long throw specialists. But and what happened was, having launched the ball into, I was sort of aiming for the 6-yard box, and McManus came out a couple of steps off his line and went up and got it, and somehow managed to completely, literally toss it into the net. And
good for him.
And I remember that particular game, we really did struggle to create chances, really struggled. And so it was a bit of fortune, real good fortune on our part that the keeper stuffed his own side.
These days, Malcolm, you would have been able to claim an assist for that. You would have your goals, and that would have gone down as an assist.
Right. But of course, it had to go down as a goal, as an own goal, because you can't score direct from throw-ins.
Absolutely.
So there was no point in me sort of trying to claim it or anything like that, because
you would have done. You would have done if you could. You would have done, mate.
If I could, yeah. You know, I
think it was a bit like a snook. It was a bit like a snooker shot. I think he went for an in-off, Malcolm. You know, in-off the keeper.
Something like that. A cannon. But I was often asked, what's the secret of being a really good goal scorer? And I said, get your arm in the air first. I've gone over the line claiming.
I mean, the interesting thing is we went from playing, and having difficulty with sides like Notts County and Bristol Rovers, as we say. But by the time we reached the semi-final, which was a 2-legged semi-final, I've got to insist, we were back playing the big boys, because it was possibly on paper the biggest test we had on the run to Wembley, because we were playing Tottenham Hotspur, who had a very, very good team, and people like your old mate Pat Jennings, the goalkeeper, Ralph Coates, who come from up here, Martin Chivers, the long throw guy, etc., etc. So we were playing, we were playing a good side.
But it was a terrific side that Spurs had. It really was, and down there, it was a cracking game of football, and Spurs had gone ahead, but Tommy Craig, he hit an absolutely fabulous shot, left peg, from about 23, 24 yards, and I turned, and I was sort of like with my arms up, because I was absolutely sure it was going to go in. Pat Jennings made one of the greatest saves I've ever seen in my life, and he somehow got right the way across, and literally just tipped it over the bar where it was about to go in the top corner. Oh, what a save! What a save!
Yeah.
But
I remember that.
It kept us going for the rest of the game, and we had that feel that if we kept them just to the 1-goal lead, that we could get it all back at St James Park, and that's how it worked out.
John Pratt scored their goal, I think, on the half hour. It was a header. It was after the ball had been played off the line, cleared off the line. He got a header in, and the 1-1.
That's right, but Gowling had given us the lead very early on.
No, not in the first game. We lost 1-0 the first game.
No, I'm
We lost
sorry. I'm
1-0
saying in the
first game.
second game.
You're going on to the second game, which we won
Right. Yes,
3-1,
it
didn't
was.
we? We won 3-1.
That's
The
right.
second game. I mean, the manager of Spurs at the time was the guy that become your manager at Arsenal, of course, Terry Neal,
Terry Neal.
Malcolm.
Mhm.
Who was manager at the time. When we played the return up here, we were now, Steve, getting into, the fever that Geordies get. Well, give them a sniff or look at Wembley and we're all up clambering up windows, aren't we? And
Yeah.
for the game here, we suddenly had 49,902 in because we were only one down, which in lots of ways over two legs when we were playing in the European Fairs Cup, you're looking and thinking that's a pretty good scoreline because we'll turn
Yes.
that over, especially if the second leg happens to be at home. And
Right.
certainly we did. And got off to a flyer with a goal after 3 minutes to cancel out the Spurs
Yeah.
lead. If you were involved in that one, remember?
Now, just a moment, John. You mentioned that Terry Neal was the manager at Spurs. Who was his coach? His assistant was Tommy Docherty, if I remember rightly. Or he had been his assistant at Hull. But at Tottenham, who was Terry Neal's coach? Because I have a feeling it was Keith Birkinshaw.
Good God. Really?
Yeah.
Well, it might well have been because certainly Berkey was a number 2 at Spurs, wasn't he, before he became a number 1?
That's right.
But,
yeah.
Interesting.
So
Interesting.
I'm pretty sure he was the number 2 for this particular game. So that sort of gave it a real edge. For all of us, on both sides.
I mean, bearing in mind what you said about Alan Gowling and Gordon Lee suggesting he'd score the goals, etc., and of course, Gowling was very much a Gordon Lee man, very much. If you remember, I was wondering what on earth you were doing yet again, making a goal for Gowling, because after 3 minutes, it was your great pass that saw Allen go round Jennings and stick it in the net to level aggregate scores of 1 apiece. And then we got the lead within a minute of the restart of the second half from a Tommy Craig corner, which was headed in by Keeley, the centre half.
Yeah. Yes. Finally, he put the ball into the opposition's net instead of our own. I always remember we were down at QPR, and Glenn Keeley had been up for a set piece going into the QPR box, and it was cleared. And he started running back through the centre of the pitch. And Queen's Park Rangers, they were attacking down the right wing. And Glenn Keeley's chasing back to get to the centre half position. And whoever it was, I think it might have been Dave, what was his name? The winger, the County Durham lad. Never mind. But he knocked a cross over, and Glenn Keeley, who's still looking to get back into the centre half position, has just dived and headed it straight into our own net. And I just, why don't you just leave it? There's nobody coming behind you. But that was Keeley. So finally, he scored at the right end.
I mean, our third goal, which was important because they pulled one back for 3-1 at the end, made it 3-2 on aggregate. Our third goal, 65 minutes, low cross from Tommy Cass. Gowling stepped over it and Nulty rifled it at the back post across the keeper and into the net. 3-1. Don McAllister scored in the 80th minute, but the game was dead by then. We'd won, we were through. And, you know, to beat Spurs over 2 legs, Malcolm, they were a good side in those days.
They were.
As Spurs often were. And they had one of the top goalkeepers ever in Pat Jennings, of course.
Pat Jennings. He was absolutely outstanding, was Pat. And, of course, I played with him later when he moved Spurs to Arsenal. And... I could tell some stories about what I witnessed him doing. This was later when we were both at Arsenal, and he positioned himself on the edge of the 6-yard box, and I forget now who we were playing, but somebody took a shot, and there he is on the edge of his 6-yard box, and without looking over his shoulder, as the ball's on its way, he's not made an effort for it at all, which was unlike Pat, because he would go for everything. And he's just shouted, "Bar!" And sure enough, the ball, a fraction of a second later, has hit the bar and has rebounded out. And he's just moved across to get his angles right. I thought that is a goalkeeper who knows precisely where his goal is. You know, it was absolutely wonderful. He was not just a great goalkeeper, but he was one of the nicest men that I've ever met. He really was. Fabulous guy. And but I wasn't sorry to see Spurs get dumped out of the League Cup at all.
Absolutely. Being the League Cup, of course, Steve, unlike the FA Cup, you know, which is the showpiece game in, say, May at the end of the season, the final of the League Cup for Newcastle was February the 28th, 1976. Yes. We were playing Manchester City. The interesting thing with Manchester City, which I didn't realise until I looked back in my record books, is in their 2-leg semi-final, they had beaten Middlesbrough. So in theory, we could have had an All-North East League Cup final, Newcastle v Middlesbrough. But again, they beat Middlesbrough quite well in the second leg. They'd lost the first leg 1-0 as we did, but then beat Middlesbrough by 4 in the second leg and went on to the final. Obviously, by now, all the Geordie crowd, all the Geordie punters are alive and kicking, and Wembley's on the horizon. And we took 30,000 Geordies down to Wembley for the second time in 2 years. And 100,000 crowd, of course. The receipts are quite interesting, shows the difference in cash. The receipts, Steve, that day were £301,000, and that was all for £100,000 crowd. Absolutely staggering. But
that's averaging out at about £3 a head.
that would give Mike Ashley palpitations.
Wouldn't it? Just?
Well, that's why he wouldn't have owned us in those days. Mind you, did get a packet of crisps thrown in, Steve, as you went through the turnstile. It's like, you know.
The big question is, were the Tudor crisps, John?
Well, no, John Tudor was out of favour by then. Everything Tudor was banned. Banned by then. The funny thing is, and Malcolm remember this, the funny thing is the build-up to the final, because it's funny that I sort of got involved at the end of it, the build-up to the final was absolutely horrendous. It had started off with Jeff Nulty, who was the Newcastle captain, got his jaw smashed at Bolton in an FA Cup tie, which Malcolm will remember because he scored 2 stupendous goals, Malcolm, in the FA Cup tie at Bolton. Barry Siddle, who was the old goalkeeper from Sunderland, went to punch the ball out and punched Jeff Nulty as much as the ball, smashed his jaw, and so he was out of the final. And Tommy Craig, therefore, captained Newcastle in a League Cup final at Wembley. We also lost David Craig. Sadly, Craigie, who was a stalwart in the European Fairs Cup victories that we had in '69, missed both the '74 and '76 Wembley finals because of his hamstrings. He was out, and then the Natras was struggling like hell with an injury and was only past fit at noon on the day, and really never got over the halfway line because he hadn't the mobility to get up and be able to get back as well. So we lost what was a lovely part of his game because he was a very smooth player. We lost that. And the build-up, which Malcolm will remember, is we've had the coronavirus dominating this season. We had a flu virus absolutely ripped through the club in the build-up to Wembley. Loads of the players suffered. And when we all went down, which Malcolm will remember, on the train to London, six Newcastle players were left behind suffering from the flu and told to travel down later. And I always remember, and I've got the pictures at home, Malcolm, when we got off the train at King's Cross, there was a load of snappers there wanting to take photographs of Newcastle coming down to play at Wembley in a League Cup final. And I was pushed in because in those days I didn't look like I do now. I looked like the same age as the players. So I was sort of shoved in with them to look as if to get the numbers up, so they looked as if there was more than three of us walking off the train. And there I was in the just a bland caption saying Newcastle United arrived for the League Cup final, etc., etc. And there was I in the pictures trying to make up the numbers. The wonderful 15 seconds of fame that was afforded me, because the picture was on the back page of all the nationals the next day, and there I was on it, like, who's that? In the caption, who's all those blokes with John Gibson? But the team, just for the listeners, before we get on to Malcolm and let him tell us about the match itself, our team was Mahoney, Natras and Kennedy. Barraclough played at 4 in the position that would have been Nulty's position, with Keeley and Howard, Burns, Cassidy, MacDonald, Gowling and Tommy Craig. Kennell, of course, our sub. But I was pleased for Barrow because he missed the '74 Cup final in very controversial circumstances that Malcolm talked about when we did the '74 Cup run, and it absolutely killed him. And at least he got into this team to represent Newcastle at Wembley. Whoops, there's the guy. That's how I got away. That's most of the '76 team there. And
what a pair of trousers! What a pair of Bobby Dazzlers!
The reason they were like that is I used to be a sailor, you see, and they're sailors' trousers.
Did you get them from did you get them from Malcolm's shop?
No, because Malcolm's trousers always disintegrated, as we heard on one of the shows with him. I think I got the velvet jacket from Malcolm's shop and the winged shirt, which meant I took off in a high wind when I went outside. I think that came from there as well. But happy days. Not the Gordon Lee days, but the days with the boys for me were happy days. I always remember a quick story about Gordon Lee. Malcolm saying the sort of feeling that he had with Gordon and how it wasn't the best of setups and how there was two different camps. I always remember that while I was very close to Joe Harvey and got on super with Joe, because of my friendship with Malcolm, I was treated very suspiciously by Gordon Lee throughout my time there with Gordon. And I always remember going into Lee's office after a game one day, and he was sitting and talking to me. But I don't know why on earth he invited me in, because we fought most of the time. But there I was anyway. And he got onto the famous story that Malcolm hadn't tracked back with his centre half to cover the corner against Newcastle. And I said the obvious, which Malcolm knew, we need him on the halfway line. The ball's half cleared out. Malcolm's he'll score with his pace. And he said, no, you've got to come back. I said, look, goal scorers don't do that. Goal scorers go on the halfway line and then they get away to score goals. I said, the guy that did that brilliantly, and he played at the time, I said, was Jimmy Greaves. He would be lurking around the halfway line. He'd pick up the ball, chum, chum, chum. It's in the back of the opposition net. And Gordon said to me, that's why I wouldn't play Jimmy Greaves, because he didn't track back, he said. And I said, well, excuse me, Gordon. I got up out my chair and I just said, excuse me, Gordon. I think I'll be leaving you now, mate, because I don't think we've got anything else to talk about. If you don't appreciate Supermac at Newcastle United and you don't appreciate Jimmy Greaves as an England player, me and they are going to have no common ground. And I was up and I was away, and that was it. But
John, I had very similar conversation, and my reaction was almost identical to yours. And I realised there was no way that I could have a sensible conversation even with the man. You know, that he and yet he wanted Gowling to score goals. You know, and he's sort of trying to do me down and prevent me from scoring, but it was all to get Gowling as the top goal scorer, and going into the Man City final, there was one sort of bugbear for us, and it was much earlier in the season we had our heaviest defeat of the season at Man City. It was at Main Road. We got beat 4-0, and so we thought, right, well, we've got to have a lot better form in the final than we had there at Main Road, and we did play a lot better.
I was going to say, Malcolm, my feeling, having watched Newcastle over donkey's years, is forgetting the early 50s when I was watching them on telly as a little schoolboy in short trousers. I thought our performance in the 76 League Cup final was probably the best final performance Newcastle have produced since the 50s. It was better than Liverpool in 74.
Absolutely.
It was better than Newcastle in 1998 and 1999 when we lost to Arsenal and we lost to Man United. Because, Malcolm, when we got to 1-1, Peter Bonds put them ahead in 11 minutes. Gowling equalised from Malcolm MacDonald setting it up, and we'll talk about that in a minute, 35 minutes. I felt from that stage on, and even after the superb goal from that little Geordie swine, Dennis Stewart, in 46 minutes, which was quite incredible, but thank you very much for a Geordie Newcastle United supporter. But I actually thought we were at 1-1 that we were going to win it, and even at 2-1, I felt that we had a great chance of winning it. It was probably we didn't have a lot to beat in taking 74, 98, and 99 finals, but I felt it was our best Wembley performance, to be truthful, and we might well have won the thing, Malcolm.
Yeah, I would agree with you, John, very much so. That once we equalised, and if I remember, I got the ball sort of inside rightish position, and got to the dead ball line and cut across, and was coming in along the dead ball line, and Alan Gowling made a terrific run to the near post, and I just smacked it into that area. With my right foot, believe it or not, and his timing was excellent on that particular occasion, and he just sort of slid. He got down low, slid in, and just got his foot in front of the defender, and got the poke that was needed to knock it over the line. And we were much the better side at that particular time in the match. And our confidence was growing and growing and growing, and we we went in at half time, and we were absolutely bubbling. We really were. We really did fancy that the goals were there to be had for us, and it was a complete and utter game changer. The overhead kick by Dennis Stewart, total game changer. It just came so out of the blue, and as we saw on the photograph there, that players just gawped. They were just stood and they gawped as he bicycle kicked and was able to actually get the ball down. So many bicycle kicks you see, they just fly into the sky. And
it was
a Newcastle fan, Dennis Stewart, Newcastle supporter, all his boy alive.
Yeah, I remember. What happened on the goal was Willie Donaghy, who worked up here years later on the coaching staff. Steve, you might well remember Willie Donaghy.
Yeah,
he knocked the ball to the far post. It was headed back across the goal by Tommy Booth, and Stewart went up. It was behind him, went up and overhead kick, scissor kick in the back of the net. And I remember on the final whistle, meandering my way down through the burrows and the bowels of Wembley to get to the dressing room, the Newcastle dressing room. And just as I got down there was Dennis Stewart outside and he had a Newcastle United striped shirt on. He swapped shirts and had a Newcastle United strip. When he actually took the cup round Wembley, you see him holding the cup with another one of their players. Their players in powder blue, and he's in a black and white strip. And when I went downstairs, there he is outside the two dressing rooms with a cup in one hand, and Newcastle United strip on. And I said, "You little bugger." I said, "But hey, terrific goal." And he said, "Gibbo," he said, "that's what you get when you get your hometown club reject you because you're too small." And what had happened, he was in Heaton and he went to Heaton Grammar and he got a trial. He went to Newcastle United and he played in the trial, and they said to him, "Oh, you're a good little player, son." There he is with his strip on next to the big man who's got, Dave Watson, the Sunderland guy with him. They were together at Sunderland. There he is with the Newcastle United shirt on. And Newcastle had said to him famously, "Oh, you're too small, son," and let him go. And of course, to rub salt into the wound, he played for Sunderland, was a superstar with Sunderland, won the cup in '73 when they beat the great Leeds side, and then he topped that off by winning in '76 by beating Newcastle United. I mean, I knew Dennis very well and stayed friends with him to this day. And I thought he had a terrific career when he went over to America as one of the pioneers when the American game was taken off with the Beckenbauer, Pelé, and all the great players. But he said to me, "Gibbo, that's what happens." And you get a Geordie scoring a stupendous goal against his boyhood heroes. And how bad can that be for us? And of course, he was he went under the rule of being the Mackem as well, having played for Sunderland in that side that the Fairy Tale Cup run of '73, the year before we got there. But it was just one. The interesting thing as well is the first goal was scored by Peter Barnes, the first goal for Man City, who was only a teenager at that time and went on to have a great year and was an England player. And his dad, Malcolm Ken Barnes, played against Newcastle in the '50s Cup final. Right. If I remember rightly, he was the guy that played with 10 men eventually. I think he might have got injured, but he played against Newcastle, his dad, in the '50s, and then Peter played in this game and scored their opening goal. He's just a kid at the time, and he went on and had a big career. But this is one of the finals that I just think, what if? I mean, I don't think what if in the '74, and I don't think what if in '98 and '99, because we were lucky to get nil in those 3 games. But this was a what if. We went very close. And as I was saying earlier on, which Malcolm, we went all the way to the 6th round of the FA Cup in the same season.
That's
If
right.
you remember, Nullty was taken out at Bolton when I think Malcolm scored one of the. He scored so many great goals, but one of his greatest, direct from a free throw in. And I remember it was just on half time because the ref blew virtually straight afterwards for half time. And I just remember the whole ground buzzing for the 10 minutes, quarter of an hour of half time, talking about this stupendous goal. And the two centre halves, which were supposed to be the strength of Bolton, one of them, of course, was Big Sam Allardyce, who
Big Sam
Big
Allardyce,
Bad
yeah.
Sam, who came to Newcastle and managed it so beautifully well it actually sacked him. And Siddall was the goalkeeper, and the midfield man, which Malcolm will remember well, was a certain Peter Reid, who
Peter
the
Reid.
Monkeys he went on and managed Sunderland as well, of course. So there was a lot of memories. We got through Bolton at the third attempt, I think. We had 2 replays with them. And then we got Derby away, and Malcolm was talking about how good Derby were in those days. We got Malcolm away in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup and lost 4-2. But the reason that came about is we had so many injuries in that game. There was no Tommy Craig, there was no David Craig, there was no Irving Natras. Mike Mahoney, the goalkeeper, was out. We had Edgar, a little kid, in goal for one of his rare appearances. You will remember, Steve, that our centre half was his son. Can you remember the lad that played centre half for us?
Yes, I remember.
That was his son. And Bomber Blackhall played at right back. Rocky Hudson that went over to the States wore the 7 shirt. So we had a very, very scratched side out at Derby and lost 4-2. But it was quite a year for the 2 domestic cups. And we haven't had too many years in either domestic cup since, bar 98 and 99, when Lord Shearer of Gosforth was our standout player.
As a reporter, John, I mean, it must be fascinating. I mean, you've got a multitude of games that you've covered, but I mean, if you had to pick a team that you've seen as at Wembley, would the 76 one or the 74 one would those for the run in? What I'm talking about is the run in. Which was the best team that you've probably seen get us to Wembley?
To get to Wembley, the 74 team, because we won through every round away from home. Our centre forward, it happened to be Malcolm McDonald, scored in every round away from home. There's no harder way to do it, flamboyant way to do it. And the sadness for that team was that we didn't turn up in the final against Liverpool. And of course, what does everybody remember, Steve? That everybody remembers finals, don't they? So they think, 74, disaster, we never got a kick against Liverpool. But the run up to it was stupendous. But we've always done that. We've always had great run ups to final. If you look at 98 and 99, without going through every round, I mean, all I can remember there, as I remembered Supermac in the semi-final in 74 scoring 2 against Burnley to win 2-0. I remember Shearer scoring the goals in 98 and 99 semis that took us to Wembley, and they were fabulous, fabulous moments without a shadow of doubt. I mean, if I had to look back on any Newcastle team and say that was the ultimate cup team, naturally it would have to be the 1969 team, Steve, because we ended up winning against one of the greatest sides Europe's produced in Uzbekistan and beating them 6-3 on aggregate. So it would be that side. But 76 was funny because the manager wasn't popular, Gordon Lee, with a lot of people after Joe, who was very, very popular. And yet, despite the cliques, despite the change in personnel being so deep, we reached the League Cup final and we reached the FA Cup quarter final in the same season. That ain't bad.
Great stuff, John and Malcolm. Obviously got hit with the gremlins towards the end there, but listen, we got everything we needed out of him. John, been an absolute pleasure listening to the recollections from you and Malcolm today, and I hope everybody at home has enjoyed it too. John Gibson, thanks very much, mate.
God bless. All the best to you for Christmas and New Year.
Attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again. But it's the only...
And don't forget, throughout the whole of December, we are asking you to think before you tweet.